I always see the desert before I hear it. Up above, the rotor blades carved invisible circles into the sky, whipping sand into a choking haze. The smell of JP-8 fuel, scorched metal, and fresh gauze mixed together, the kind of scent I'd long ago started calling home. On the vibrating floor of the HH-60, I clipped my harness, ran my eyes across the checklist. Carabiner locked, hoist secure, med bag complete. Over the intercom, the pilot's voice ticked steady as a metronome. 10 seconds out. I threw him a thumbs up, leaned into the open door, and let the desert slap me in the face. Sand crunched between my teeth. Below, the dirt road knotted down to a thin thread, 2 pickups parked sideways with hoods thrown open, men waving tiny as matchsticks. New Mexico sun bore down without mercy. Even the shadows looked tired. I dropped the line, let my body swing between 2 storms, the screaming rotor above and my own heartbeat inside my ears. My boots hit the ground, knees flexing just enough. I flashed the all-clear to the crew. The casualty was face down on the shoulder, left shoulder mangled, blood soaking into gravel. "I'm Mara, United States Air Force," I said, but my hands were already 3 steps ahead of my mouth, cervical collar, airway, pupils. The desert hissed around me like it had something personal to say, or maybe that was just my brain running hot. "Hold his legs straight," I ordered the kid kneeling nearby. And right then my phone buzzed sharp against my chest pocket. A message. I ignored it. Out here, the only thing allowed to interrupt protocol was the beeping of a monitor. I braced the shoulder, counted down, and snapped the joint into place. The man screamed like we'd dragged him from a fire. I'd heard that sound 100 times, and it never once got easier. We slung him up, cables straining, dust coughing out beneath our boots. Back inside the bird, I shoved a pillow under his arm, wired him to the monitor, called out vitals loud enough for everyone in the cabin. Co-pilot passed me a water bottle. I shook my head. Sweat streaked down my temple, salty in my mouth. The phone still wriggled against my ribs like a fish trying to get free. Once airway stabilized, triage steady, I finally pulled it out. One line on the screen. "Come home, Dad is dying." I stared at it the way you look at a crack in the ceiling. Thin, almost invisible, but if you don't deal with it, the whole roof can cave in. I shoved the phone back, taped another line, checked his radial pulse, syncing my own heartbeat with the thrum of the rotor, steady, stubborn. Up front, someone cracked a joke about last night's ball game. People only joke when the patient is out of the woods. I didn't let the message in. Not yet. At the ER, we handed him off, signed the little box where sweat, grit, and whispered, "Thank gods," all collapse into a single signature. Outside, the HH-60 crouched in the sun like a beast still panting. Its skin burned my palm when I laid a hand on it, the way you press a hand to a lover's forehead to check for fever. "Good work, buddy," I muttered. And then the phone buzzed again. This time a call. I let it ring out, then leaned back against the landing gear and reread the message. In my head, the words formed not in English, not in any tongue I grew up with, but in that made-up language I used to survive. Come home. Strange how even the word father tasted wrong. I opened my notepad app, typed like drafting an op order. Intel, father reportedly dying, source, family. To confirm, truth/trap. Row, never go alone. I screenshotted it, dropped it into our squadron group chat. Requesting leave, Midwest run, will brief chief in 30. I knew nobody would ask about family. They'd only ask what I needed to stay safe in the air and on the ground. That was the only kind of love I trusted, the kind that came with a checklist. In the hangar bathroom, the cracked mirror looked like a frozen river delta. I splashed cold water over my face, down the scar on my chin, rotor wash accident years back. Water stung, but it sharpened me. In the reflection, I saw what no movie ever puts in focus. A woman in uniform, hair pulled tight, dark circles from night shifts, hands that knew exactly which bolt to tighten to keep both machine and man alive. Chief's office smelled like stale coffee and dust. Dartboard on the wall, calendar full of duty rosters. He listened to my rundown without cutting in, then asked, "How long?" 3 days if the roads hold, back before next maintenance cycle. He exhaled like loosening a stubborn bolt. "Fine, but Quinn, take someone with you." I raised an eyebrow. "You don't fly solo in this sky. Don't drive solo into your families. Pick somebody. Someone who knows when to shut up." I almost smiled. "Yes, Chief." The sun tried to melt everything into tin as I slid into my beat-up Jeep. Every time I cranked it, the engine growled like a rotor clearing its throat. Before rolling out, I called Cade, our co-pilot master of silence, but when he spoke, he cut the last rope clean. "Wanna ride shotgun on a road trip?" I asked. "No booze pit stops, I promise." "You've never promised that before." I paused. "It's about my dad." He went quiet then, North Gate, 20 minutes. "Bring your sunrise playlist," I said, "and an empty hard drive." "What for?" "To dump the stuff we don't want to keep in our heads." I threw a couple cotton tees, faded fatigues, and boots into my pack. Tucked in a stapler, a roll of duct tape, and a pouch of spare bolts I'd collected in the hangar. Not superstition, just a reminder. Whole structures stand because of things no one sees. On my desk sat an unopened envelope, last month's commendation for patient survival rate. I stuffed it in not for pride, but because the cardstock stiffened my pack. Cade was waiting at the north gate, leaning on his battered pickup, holding out 2 coffees. The desert wind had him squinting. "Long drive," he said. "Long drive," I echoed. We didn't talk about Dad. When you're headed into turbulence, chatter is wasted oxygen. The desert unrolled like a blank page as we drove out. My hand on the wheel hummed with the same vibration I trusted under the belly of a helicopter, physics more reliable than people. Out past the fence line, wind turbines turned lazy like rotors with no mission. "My family never had a checklist," I muttered. Cade snorted. "Then write one." I laughed. "Already did. Row, no closed-door arguments, no vague apologies, no past debts cashed in the present. If they climb the chain, I drag them back to ground." And exfil. "Got one, diner off Route 66. Stopped there once with foster folks. I know the exits." Phone buzzed again. A photo this time, thin arm, Roman 4 jammed in caption, "He doesn't have much time." My jaw locked, eyes on the horizon. "Could be truth, could be bait," I said. "Either way, I'm going, just not as the lost kid anymore." Cade glanced at me in the mirror, holding my eyes long enough to make sure I believed it. I did. Not because they'd changed, because I had a squadron now. Before signal dropped, I shot one last email to Chief. Movement plan attached. Gas stops, nearest hospitals, emergency contacts. Annex, ROE family meeting. Pulled over, stepped out, let the desert wind punch my shirt into my chest. I palmed a shiny bolt from my pack, turned it over in my hand. In foster care, I'd counted bolts in a basement wall to forget the smell of mold. Now I counted them to remind myself I can rebuild. By the time we rolled back on the highway, the sky had gone honey-colored. The Jeep rattled to a country song Cade queued up, something about roads that don't lead home but keep you moving anyway. I pressed the gas, thought about the man waiting hundreds of miles away, the empty chairs of my childhood, and the rotors that never stop spinning until your pulse steadies. My hand tightened on the wheel like it had on the HH-60 frame. "Mission start," I whispered. Fall in the Midwest has a military kind of wind. Punctual, sharp, like a drill sergeant. 5 o'clock on the dot, it marched through the maples, ordering every leaf to fall in line. I was 12, sitting on the wooden steps of my third foster house, counting the screws in the porch wall the way other kids counted family in their phone books. 1, 2, 3, and then nothing. That house had a garage that smelled of mold, its thin walls rattling whenever the wind came through. Ray, the foster dad, carried his belly like a badge, pressing against a worn leather belt. He ruled the house with a TV remote in one hand and cheap beer in the other. His wife, Dina, spoke only in the scrape of spoons against bowls. They didn't take me in for love, they took me in for the state check that hit like clockwork. I'd already lost my real family. Dad took my brother, Mom took my sister. With Ray and Dina, I lost my right to make noise. Silence was policy. On my first night, Dina handed me a thin blanket and pointed to the basement. Your room. The bulb overhead flickered yellow, damp walls breathing mildew like an old coat left too long in the rain. In the corner sat a rusted shelf with loose nails scattered. I picked one up, rolled it between my fingers. Small, grooved, precise. When seated right, it could hold a whole frame together. I thought, maybe if I had enough of these, I could build myself a new life. That night, the washing machine groaned like an engine about to seize. I laid my jacket under my back, counting screws until sleep came. Ray had rules. The fridge belonged to the man who paid the bills, not to strays. I learned to eat like a thief, door cracked only during commercials, lungs filling with the scent of BBQ sauce and peanut butter until my stomach clenched. Once I made a sandwich, white bread with pickles. Ray caught me. His sweat glistened in the kitchen's fluorescent light. He slammed my wrist against the counter, his grip cold, firm, like pressing down on a trapped animal. Here, you eat when I say you eat. His son stood in the doorway, smirking. The fridge door closed behind me with a sound like a cell block. Friday nights were movie night. They laughed on the couch, popcorn grease shining on their fingers. I sat on the stairs, half in shadow. Once I laughed at a line on screen. Ray turned. What's so funny to you? I shut my mouth. Learned to open it just enough to breathe, never enough to sound. At school, a counselor asked if I was okay. I nodded. Okay became a slippery staircase. Fall long enough and you forget the ground. Winter came like a sentence. The basement turned into a cold bunker. I slid a sheet of cardboard under the thin mattress. One night, Dina caught me lighting a candle for warmth. She tossed it in the trash, smoke staining the air. Later, Ray staggered down drunk, beer breath filling the stairwell. He shut the basement door and dropped the bolt. The click sounded like a round chambered. Darkness filled my lungs. My fingers brushed against a rusty nail fallen from the shelf. I twisted it, felt the grooves bite my skin. And in that moment, I imagined a helicopter door sealing shut, a mechanic's hand torquing the final bolt before liftoff. I slid the nail into the latch, turned it a quarter, and click. The bolt gave. The door shifted open just a hair. I didn't push it further. I closed it again, memorizing the motion. Quarter turn left, click, then back, my first secret. I slept sitting up, clutching that nail like a charm. In the morning, Ray unlocked the door as if nothing happened. If you want to stay here, you learn to be quiet. I nodded, but in my head I was already drawing maps, whose footsteps sounded heavier, what time the fridge opened, how many beats between the stair light switch and the creak of the third step. I didn't know the word protocol yet, but I was writing one. At school, I hoarded ketchup packets in my shoe box. Dina called it stealing. She made me stand facing the porch wall, forehead pressed to the cold screws. I counted them. 1,297 by the 100th, I promised myself. If I can count, I can survive. If I can survive, I won't stay here forever. The cafeteria gave out free chocolate milk and sandwiches. I wolfed mine down, then stuffed half in my coat pocket for later. Once, the lunch guy shook his head, slid me another carton. Kid, eat, it's okay. His kindness sounded like a foreign language. After school, I hid in the library. History books on aviation smelled of dust and chalk. I ran my fingers over glossy pictures of helicopters, feeling the cool safety of metal I hadn't yet touched. The librarian handed me a flyer. Career fair, the military will be there. I folded it, hid it under my mattress. That night, I dreamed of rotors spinning, not the stale air from a vent, but the kind of wind that carried people out of fire. Ray hated the library girl. He wanted me scrubbing floors, folding laundry, scrubbing pans. One evening, his son spilled milk on the carpet. Ray shoved a rag at me, made me scrub until the fibers shredded. My wrist screamed, but I stayed silent. "Good, knows how to listen," he grunted. In my mind, I marked it down. Proof, these people only respect silence. Note to self, one day do the opposite. Spring brought a cross-country run. I signed up because first prize meant free lunch for a week. I ran with an empty stomach, lungs burning like frost. At the finish, I came second. The teacher pressed a voucher into my hand, eyes crinkling into parenthesis-shaped kindness. I brought it home, laid it on the kitchen table like a trophy. Dina squinted. "What's this worth?" She crumpled it, tossed it. I fished it from the trash, smoothed it flat, and tucked it in my pocket. I didn't argue. I just switched arenas. If they won in that kitchen, I'd win on the track. Storm nights were training. Lightning cracked the sky, water leaked through the ceiling. Ray shoved a bucket into my arms. I stood in the kitchen, catching drips for hours, knees trembling, counting every drop. 1, I'll leave. 2, I'll leave. 3, I'll leave. When it ended, he muttered, "Not useless after all." I smiled faintly, not at his words, at the fact I'd stood steady for 2 hours in thunder and didn't break. My first lesson in what they'd later call calm under fire. At 14, I was placed in another foster home. This one wore church clothes and prayed longer than they ate. They didn't hit. They didn't lock. They ignored. "Eat less," they told me. "Don't waste God's blessings." My shoulder blades pushed sharp against sweaters. At school, the counselor asked if I wanted to talk. I stared at my hands, scarred wrists from counters, scratches from rusted cans. "I want to learn to fix things," I whispered. She blinked, then smiled. "There's a mechanics class in the woodshop, interested." I learned torque wrenches, the sound of metal telling you it's seated right. One afternoon, a crowbar slipped, bruised my hand. I wrapped it myself, went back to finish tightening the last bolt on a chair frame. The shop teacher chuckled. "Quinn, you torque by ear." "By ear and by heart," I said. His smile softened. "You got anywhere to go?" I froze. He didn't press. Just handed me a pair of good gloves. "Take care of your hands, they'll take you far." That night, I slept wearing those gloves. My hands were the only thing no one could take from me. At 15, a flyer on the school board caught me, Career Fair U.S. Air Force. A blurry photo of a rescue helicopter printed in blue ink, not glory, discipline, like oil on metal, thin but enough to keep rust away. I folded it into my jacket, walked out across a yard of fallen leaves. I kicked one, watched it spin like a paper rotor, and in my head I heard the blades. That night, foster parents screamed about money. I locked myself in my room, spread my treasures on the desk. Nail, bolts, ketchup packets, a bandage, an old lunch voucher, and that Air Force flyer. I whispered to myself, one day I'll fix things that deserve fixing, not just mop up leaks for people who break me. I wrote 3 lines in my notebook. Nobody saves you, save yourself. Nobody listens, speak with action. When you leave, don't forget the kid who counted bolts to stay alive. The next morning, the counselor introduced me to a recruiter in a crisp blue uniform. He smiled. "So what do you like doing?" I answered. "I like tightening bolts until they're right." He laughed, then stopped laughing, looked me dead in the eye. "We need people like that." In that moment, something unlocked inside me. Like the night in the basement when the nail turned, when the latch gave. Only this time, it wasn't a door. It was the sky. Years later, sitting on the floor of an HH-60, desert dust swirling around me, I still remembered that autumn. The screws, the leaves, the click of a lock, and the nail in my palm. People say childhood is something you leave behind. I carried mine like a toolbox. I never showed it off, but when I needed it, every tool was there. And tonight, with my Jeep chewing north and my phone heavy with the words, "Dad is dying," I reached into my pocket, rubbed the shiny bolt I always carried. The grooves were cool, steady, like the forehead of someone whose fever had just broken. I smiled faintly, not from warmth but from readiness. Whatever door waited ahead, I was ready to torque it shut or open on my terms. The basement smelled like a wet raincoat left too long in a closet. The single bulb overhead buzzed, breathing weak yellow light. When Ray was angry, he shut the door, slammed the bolt, then wedged an old paint bucket against the stairs. Nobody in, nobody out. Cold crept up my bare feet, biting each toe like invisible ants. I sat on the sagging mattress, back pressed to the damp wall, listening to the muffled TV upstairs. Laughter, beer cans popping, sports scores, they played like a radio that couldn't find its channel. Hunger stretched minutes into cables with no end. I pulled my treasure box from under the rusty shelf, a cookie tin holding scraps of wire, 2 bent nails, 3 loose screws, and 1 old Band-Aid. I picked up a screw, rolled it between my fingers, listening to the tiny rasp of threads. The world stands on things no one notices: doors, chairs, staircases, and a child. That night the wind rattled the vent, whining like a broken rotor trying to turn. I pulled the blanket over my face, but the mold pushed through anyway. Then the door slammed. Click. The bolt slid home. My heart stuttered. I counted 1, 2, 3, 30. At 30, I'd trained myself not to cry. Tears wasted water, and water was survival. I crept up to the first step, ear pressed to wood. Silence pressed back, thick as after an explosion. My fingers searched the edge of the door, splintered paint, a jagged nail like a thorn. I cut my skin, a reminder. I pulled out one of the rusty nails from the tin, pressed it into my palm until it left an imprint. Some jobs no one assigns you, but if you don't do them, no one will. I slid the nail into the latch, turning slow, threads grinding against steel. Quarter turn, pause, another quarter. Tiny sound, like a grain of sand crying out. To me, it was a flare lighting the night. Click, just one sound. You can live a whole life waiting for one click like that. I didn't push the door open. I reset the bolt, crawled back to the mattress, sweaty palms still clutching the nail. I dozed like a guard on duty, 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, eyes flicking open to check. At dawn, pale light cut the dust through the crack under the door. I tried again. This time, the door gave wider, wide enough for a small body. Cold winter air funneled down the stairs, sharp and endless. I crawled up, back glued to each step, heart hammering like a rotor spooling up. The kitchen smelled of stale coffee and last night's smoke. The fridge hummed like it knew I was coming. I slipped 2 slices of bread in a ketchup packet, loot heavy as stolen ammo in enemy territory. No time for guilt. Survival has a checklist: calories, water, sugar, exit. At the back door, I pulled the latch, no squeak. The wind slapped my face clean of basement stink. I stepped into the yard, snow freckling dead grass, breath billowing smoke. I didn't run. I marched, steady, head down, like an infantryman under fire. At the fence corner, a rotted plank gaped loose. I slid under, coat tearing another rip. The alley spilled into a small street, flag frayed above the post office, library doors already open for retirees with morning newspapers. I kept walking. Rule 1. When you leave a prison someone built, don't turn back to count the bars. The library was warm in a way books describe hugs. The morning librarian had eyes that knew how to keep secrets. She didn't ask the wrong questions. She just slid me a paper cup of water, a clean handkerchief, and said, "The quiet room is free." I didn't go there. I followed a sign instead, counseling, room 104, no appointment. I knocked. "Come in," a woman's voice. Beige walls, a potted plant, messy desk that proved she worked here for real. Loose curls pinned up with a plastic clip. She looked up like I was the first human of her day. I'm June. I perched on the edge of the chair, hands locked to stop the shaking. The room was warm enough for me to realize I'd been cold for years. She slid me a pack of crackers. Any allergies? I shook my head. I ate slow, jaw aching from clenching all night. She didn't ask, "Where are your parents?" Or, "Who did this to you?" She asked, "Where do you sleep?" "The basement." "You have a key." "One rusty nail." She nodded, serious, like that answer made perfect sense. "There are two kinds of doors, Mara. Ones that open with keys and ones that open with decisions." I smirked bitter. Decisions like tightening bolts. Her eyes lit. "Exactly. Right torque, right thread, not stripped, not broken." Something cracked open in me. She pulled a thin handout, safety plan. Phone numbers, safe addresses, rules of contact, a blank line for escape signal. "We don't romanticize survival," she said, voice like a tech reading a checklist. "We write protocol. Future choices get easier if you issue yourself orders now." I wrote 3 in block letters. Hide dry socks and a granola bar in school backpack. Memorize bus route to library and police station. No shortcut across football field. Keep a screw in pocket. Touch it whenever I feel invisible. She smiled. "Good, and one more, something you'll do at 17. She didn't say leave, she just said, "Sign up for a different life. The kind where people use checklists to keep each other alive." "Air Force?" I asked. She didn't laugh, her eyes did. "If you belong to the rotor." The poster on her wall read, "The last of human freedoms is to choose one's attitude." The words sank into the plan like a screw finding its thread. For the first time, my body wanted sleep, not escape, but rest. She handed me a plastic appointment card, scribbled, "If you miss it, I'll still be here." The sentence burned my throat more than hunger ever had. I nodded, slipped it into my pocket, touched the screw like checking torque. Back outside, the town rattled awake. Mop buckets on vinyl floors, pens clicking, newspapers unfolding. The post office flag cracked in the wind. On the corner, a repair shop hung a calendar with a rescue helicopter slicing the sky. I pressed my palm to the glass over the picture, cold and smooth. In my head, flight path, landing zone, payload, sling, crosswind, copy. I crawled back under the fence, slipped inside the kitchen. Ray's coat on the chair, ashtray still warm. The basement stairs yawned black. I put the nail back in the cookie tin but slid the shiny screw into my pocket. When I turned the latch, click, same sound but different meaning. Not a sentence, a choice. That night I slept 40 minutes straight, a record. Dreamed of a ceiling opening into sky, a rotor's shadow spreading over me. Someone whispered, "Right torque, right thread." I whispered back, "Copy." Morning came. I packed the safety plan between math homework and dull pencils. On the walk to school, the wind stung my eyes, not from cold. From the new knowledge, I could put my hand on something bigger than that basement. I didn't choose where I was born, but I could choose the force I'd apply. Years later, on a blistering New Mexico flight line, torque wrench in hand, I'd still hear that first click of the basement door. That night I hadn't run. I had designed an exit, and exits, if drawn right, always lead somewhere with rotors. I didn't join the Air Force for flags or honor codes. I walked into the recruiter's office with an empty backpack and an emptier stomach. On the form, I circled Air Force because next to it, in plain print, it promised 3 meals/day, housing provided. 3 meals and a roof. That was the baseline checklist for a kid who'd stolen pickles from other people's kitchens just to stay alive. When I signed, I told myself, at least here, food would come in trays that looked the same for everyone. Boot camp wasn't home, but at least it was fair. The whistle blew at 0500, sharp as a round leaving the chamber. We ran PT through wet grass, sweat mixing with dew and the metallic smell of chain-link fence. I fell behind once, lungs burning, and the drill sergeant roared in my ear. "Quinn, you think this is a picnic?" I bit down, pushed back into formation, thighs screaming. Some mornings I thought I'd collapse, but the lunch tray, steel pan with chicken and green beans kept me upright. Not because it was good, because it was guaranteed. For the first time, I ate slow, not hiding bread in my sleeve. Hell Week in the desert was the first real test. Sand ground between my teeth, sweat turning dust into mud on my neck. We hauled stretchers across inclines, shoulders burning, feet sinking. At night, we bivouacked under the sound of helicopters circling above, rotors pounding the sky like war drums. I lay on my poncho, eyes open, thinking, that's the heartbeat of a machine that knows survival. My hand rose to my chest, syncing my pulse with the rhythm overhead. The first time I touched an HH-60, I almost cried. Not out of emotion, but because the rotor wash slapped my eyes full of grit. Fuel, vibrating metal, engine heat. It all came together like a song I dreamed of back when I was locked in a basement. I hunched low against the wind, heart saying one word, home. Chief stood next to me, a man with salt and pepper hair, arms thick as cables. He watched me fumble with a torque wrench, then took it, turned half a rotation, and leaned in close enough that only I could hear. Quinn, don't think like a mechanic. Think like a mission commander. Sweat slid down my temple. He didn't smile, didn't shout. He just tuned me to a new frequency. From that day, every bolt I torqued wasn't just a bolt. It was a flight, a patient, a crew. Barracks life taught me what foster care never did. Eating at the same table, sleeping in the same row, laughing in the same language. Once Jackson slid his leftover mashed potatoes onto my tray. You eat like somebody's about to snatch it away. He grinned. I flushed, but for the first time I swallowed without choking. Off-duty nights, we sat on empty ammo crates, feet propped up, swapping family stories or the lack of them. I learned I wasn't the only one with a basement, only the architecture changed. Graduation day, A-school. We lined up in crisp blues, creases sharp enough to cut. When they called my name, I stepped forward, accepted the certificate, heard my squad clap. No one there knew I once counted wall screws to forget hunger. But in that applause, I heard a truth. I belonged to a formation. No longer the shadow on a foster stairwell. That night, the squadron threw a BBQ right on the flight line. Smoke curled into rotor wash from an HH-60 running checks. We laughed, shouted, tossed a football under the floodlights. Someone shoved a root beer into my hand. I sat on a wooden crate, biting into charred brisket, head tipped back as the rotors turned slow against the dark blue sky. The blades no longer sounded like a prison door. They sounded like a collective heartbeat. A chosen family. Chief raised a paper cup, eyes locking on me longer than necessary. Quinn, he said, you've learned the most important thing. Nobody survives alone. My throat tightened. I slipped a hand into my breast pocket, fingers brushing the shiny bolt I always carried. Cold, steady. But that night, for the first time, I believed I could warm it with my own hand. In the military, I'd always believed the chain of command was a cable, taut, steel, unbreakable, holding a person to the sky. Until the morning it got yanked backward, straight into the past I thought I'd buried. Chief called me into his office. Neon light cracked overhead, coffee gone cold on the desk. He slid a stack of printed emails across to me, paper stiff as sheet metal. Subject line, family emergency, request support for SSGT Mara Quinn, CC, brigade commander, personnel officer, and me. First page, my brother's voice, slick as cheap cologne. Mara must come home to care for Dad. We've carried too much. She's the youngest, unmarried, the one best suited to sacrifice her career temporarily. Next page, my sister. Please encourage my sister to fulfill filial duty. Don't let people laugh at our family. Last page, my mother. Blood is thicker than water. Please help my daughter see this. The words clung like wet rope. But what choked me wasn't the content. It was that they dragged my chain of command, the only roof I'd ever chosen, into the fight as leverage. A crowbar to bend me back into a child who knew how to obey. Chief didn't react. He just listened, the way he listened to rotor noise, silent, waiting for the right frequency. "What do you want me to do, Quinn?" "I want to handle this like a mission, Chief." I opened my notebook. Fresh page, blue pen across the top. Row family contact. Bullet points. No private meetings, only in public midday with a clear exit. No bargaining with emotions, every ask must be specific with evidence and reciprocity. Chain of command off limits, no one uses my unit as leverage. Escape clause if gaslight, insults, or threats begin, withdraw. No explanations. Chief tapped 2 fingers on the desk like testing if a panel would hold. Good. Add comms plan and a witness. You don't fly solo in the sky and you don't walk solo into that family storm. Who? Cade, I said. He knows how to stay quiet. And how to say one sentence when it counts, Chief replied. Leaving his office, I crawled under the HH-60 belly, checking sling lines and bolts. My hands moved normal, but my head buzzed like blades chewing through crosswind. Phone buzzed. Sister, Dad won't make it. You want that guilt forever. Brother, the Air Force taught you sacrifice, but not duty to family. Cousin, we're all ashamed of you. Each text a shard of shrapnel, not lethal, but designed to bleed. Jackson walked over, offered a water bottle. You good, Quinn? He saw the screen flash for half a second, didn't pry. In a squadron, you good means standing close enough to catch you if you fall. I'm good, I said, drinking chlorine and desert dust. I told him, got a ground mission coming up. He smirked. Then wear your flight helmet. That night we gathered on the flight line for a low-key BBQ. Burnt ribs, corn dripping butter, kids of squadron mates running sticky-fingered laps. Someone strummed a guitar in the back of a pickup. Cade sat beside me on a crate, past a napkin. Don't smear BBQ on the uniform, he joked, nodding at sauce on my sleeve. I laughed, then laid out the basics. He didn't comment, just opened his phone, typed notes. Route 66 diner, noon, outside table, back to wall. Exit through kitchen plus west lot. Our car, closest slot to exit. Seeing it, my lungs loosened. And comms, he asked. Code word, click. He grinned faintly. Basement door. Yeah, here, click, we're out, he chuckled. Still the kid with the rusty nail. I shook my head. That kid carries a checklist now. Back in the barracks, I spread my notebook on the bunk, writing the way I draft an op order. Threat assessment, emotional blackmail, guilt, filial piety, family shame. COC leverage, emails to commanders. Disinformation, rewriting past, shifting blame. Mitigation, public setting, record if legal. Exhibits, DCFS reports, medical records, counselor notes. Witness, Cade. Comms, click equals exit. Crosswind equals change tables. Low fuel equals wrap in 5 minutes. End state, clear boundaries by action, no vague promises, no debts without receipts. My hand shook on the words end state. I set the pen down, smelled the cheap soap still on my skin. The basement replayed like an echo chamber, rusted nail, slice of light, me sliding through the crack without turning back. I whispered, no negotiations with darkness. Next day, admin office. Paper slid across, family concern, wellness check. Language polished enough to sting. The unit stands ready to support SSGT Quinn in caring for family. I signed, adding note, member will travel under personal leave, mission plan attached. The young officer blinked. You already have a plan? I smiled politely. Always. Back in the hangar, I turned a panel, torque wrench clicking soft when it hit the limit. That sound was truth, tight enough to hold, not so tight it stripped. I thought tomorrow's meeting must torque like this. Phone buzzed again. Brother attaching photo, Dad's arm with Roman 4. Caption, happy now. Another relative emailed an article about children's duty. I deleted both from inbox, filed them under a folder Cade taught me to make. Noise. Rule 1. Filter noise before it floods the cockpit. Then I wrote Chief a short email. I take full responsibility for family contact. Recommend leadership not reply to filial duty messages. ROE attached. He wrote back one line, approved, fly your plan. Evening, Cade spread a paper map on his truck hood, old school but solid under the hands. Fuel stop at mile 142. Diner table here back to this wall. If they show with more, we change tables, code crosswind. I added it to my notes. He frowned. We need a second witness. Silent but close. Jackson, except his wife's due any day. Dell then, Cade said. Good at reading lips, suits silence. I texted Dell, need you at Route 66. Sit close, no words, no beer. He texted back, copy, no noise. Second night I ran laps around the base perimeter. Sky dusted with stars like salt. Every stride was a sentence I wouldn't say. I'm sorry. No, I'll try. No, I owe you. Hell no, by the flight line. An HH-60 blinked its nav lights like a warning. Don't slip torque. I pressed my palm to its skin. Tomorrow I walk in because I choose, not because I'm pulled. Third morning I picked up copies from records. Clerk with silver hair handed me a fat envelope. Stay safe, Quinn. Inside, DCFS reports, old medical notes, counselor write-ups, even scraps of my own words. I stack them into a red binder, label slapped on front. Action equals love. Ammo. Before close of day, Chief handed me a card, emergency contact for JAG. Not to scare them, he said. To remind you law is frame, not whip. He met my eyes. Don't expect them to understand. This isn't persuasion, it's establishment. His tone hit like blades sinking before lift. Yes, Chief. That night, barracks dark as a film negative. Notebook open, final ROE written. Public only. No uniform. Exhibits only when denial surfaces. No promises. No apologies for what wasn't mine. Codes, click exit, crosswind, change table, low fuel end. End state, I walk out on my own legs, not dragged. I closed it, set it beside my Jeep keys. Darkness filled the room, but not like the basement. Here, darkness was just pre-rotor silence. My hand on my chest, heartbeat steady. Enough torque. Ready. Tomorrow, Route 66 diner. Outdoor table, back to wall, west exit through kitchen. Cade opposite, Dell 2 tables over, sunglasses, drinking water. Red binder on the table beside my coffee. If someone slung filial duty like a noose, I'd slide the binder forward. And if the words turned to whips, I'd say one word, small, sharp, with just the right torque. Click. Then stand. Door open. On my terms. Route 66 at noon felt more like a field mess than a diner. Silverware clattered. An old radio wheezed out country songs. Grease from burgers burned into the air and mixed with cheap coffee. I took the corner table outside, back to the brick wall, exactly as my checklist dictated. In front of me the red binder lay flat, quiet, coiled, like a sidearm waiting to be drawn. Cade sat across, silent as promised. 2 tables back, Dell in sunglasses pretended to read the menu, his eyes never leaving us. I leaned into my chair, hands flat on the table, not defensive, not open. Just a soldier eating lunch. Then they arrived. My mother led the charge, thin coat, eyes red as if she'd been weeping all morning. My father hobbled in on a cane, face gray, hands shaking, but his gaze still drilling like a power tool looking for weakness. My brother and sister trailed close, dressed like it was Sunday service. They stopped short when they saw me. Mother exhaled, slid into the seat across from mine. Mara, she said, voice dull as a blunt knife. You finally came back. I didn't answer, just nudged my coffee aside, clearing the middle of the table. My brother leaned forward, voice low but sharp. Dad's dying. What the hell are you doing here? Come home. Drop that Air Force crap for once. I gave the smallest nod, pulled the red binder into the light. Paper rustled. a sound that cut sharper than shouting. The first page, a DCFS report dated when I was 12, neglect, food withheld, child locked in basement. I read it out loud, every syllable crisp, not for them but for the air in the diner to hear. Heads lifted from fries and milkshakes at nearby tables. My mother shot up, hands trembling. "That's a lie, we gave you a roof." I flipped to the next page, medical note, bruises on wrist, signs of malnutrition. Paper doesn't lie. I laid it in front of her like evidence in court. My sister's jaw clenched. "You're humiliating us in public." I met her eyes, voice low, steady. "No, I'm ending this. Humiliation isn't truth, this is." My father struck his cane against the tile. His voice rasped. "You think that uniform makes you someone? Blood is blood." I smoothed the binder cover, then raised my head. "Blood is biology, family is action, and your action was abandonment." Silence fell hard. Somewhere a spoon clattered on the floor. I slid the binder forward into the middle, then left it there. My mother stared, lips quivering. My brother turned away. My sister flushed red. My father's eyes clouded, not with tears but with defeat, as if realizing this battle had no weapon left. I pulled the binder back, slid it into my pack, laid down a bill on the table. "That covers lunch. I owe nothing else." Chair legs screeched as I stood. Cade rose with me. Dell peeled away from his table, moving ahead to clear a path. I looked once more at the four faces frozen in their own courtroom silence. "Love is action," I said, scalpel clean. "And my action is walking out." Outside, the wind slapped my face, carrying the tang of gasoline from the service station next door. In my head, the thump of rotors filled the air, syncing with my steps. Each footfall tightened the bolt inside my chest, locking the frame steady. At the car, Cade tossed me the keys. The engine roared awake, rattling deep like an HH-60 winding up for lift. In the rearview mirror, the diner shrank fast, just another coordinate erased from the map. I didn't look back. Not now, not ever. The road out of Route 66 was so quiet I could hear the car keys rattling against the dash. Cade put on his sunrise playlist, thin guitar notes drifting like mist. I thought the storm would come after I laid the binder on the diner table and said my last line. A breakdown, a shaking fit, maybe vomit, at least a rage that would foul my mouth. But nothing came. Just a thick silence, dense as the acoustic padding in a helicopter cabin after an explosion, when your ears ring and the world separates into frame and bolts. I called it the still zone. We stopped 12 miles out at a gas station. Heat poured off the tin roof, pooling like molten glass. I drained a bottle of water just to remind myself I still had a throat. Cade leaned against the hood, eyes squinting, not asking the cheap pity line, "You okay?" He just said, "Crosswinds dropped." I smirked. "Copy, still flying." We drove on, 2 hours. No words, didn't need them. Some flights, words are just interference. The email landed when we crossed the state line, sky bruised purple. My phone buzzed once, then stilled, envelope icon glowing. One line he passed. No exclamation, no "I'm sorry." I laid the phone face down on the dash. "Read it," I told Cade. He skimmed, folded it shut, voice flat as horizon. "Your father died. 1532, funeral to be announced." A dry click fired in my chest. The same as that basement bolt years ago. I nodded. "Copy." We didn't head for town, no funeral home, no family house. I pulled off into a dead fairground, grass burnt yellow, folding chairs scattered, tents collapsed into bare frames. I yanked the brake, sat there. Cade opened the trunk, pulled out 2 folding chairs, a paper bag, and a small metal box. He set them in my hands, matches, a blank sheet of paper. "Purge protocol," he said, like reminding me to wear gloves before maintenance. That night, we rented a cheap roadside cabin, scratchy blanket, detergent smell strong enough to almost comfort. Cade took the room next door. I stood alone in mine, backpack on the chair. silence heavy as a hospital ward after night shift. I pulled the red binder, spread it across the bed. One by one, I laid out the exhibits like X-rays, DCFS reports, grainy photos of bruised wrists, counselor notes from a small-town office. Each piece a bolt, holding up the frame people call my childhood. I didn't torch them right away. I read them, and the words became echoes. A spoon clattering on diner tile, a cane slamming brick, my mother's sob without tears. The paper felt thin enough to tear by accident. Part of me wished it would, so I could blame fate instead of choice. But my hand held steady. I lit the match, touched it to the corner. Flame crawled slow, golden as caramel melting, then swallowed the word neglect like it had expired. People say death ends things. It doesn't. Death builds a new still zone, thick enough to muffle questions, but not to force answers on the living. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't sad, but because in that moment, as paper turned to ash, I remembered the poster June once taped to her wall. The last of human freedoms is to choose one's attitude. Forgiveness wasn't a gentle signature. It was torquing the file closed at the right force. I burned a few more sheets. Smoke mixed with detergent in the room. Wind slid through the cracked window, tilting the flame like a rotor shifting pitch. From my pocket, I pulled the shiny bolt I carried like a charm. I didn't throw it into the fire. I set it aside on a blank page. In block letters, I wrote, "Action equals love. End state, calm, midnight, Cade knocked. 2 gas station coffees in hand." "I know it's wrong time for caffeine," he said, "but it keeps hands from shaking." I smiled, took it. The bitter cheapness stung my eyes kindly. "Tomorrow, drive straight back." I shook my head. "Detour. Why?" "To unlearn looking back." He nodded, left the door ajar. A strip of hallway light bled in, enough to remind me I wasn't locked in. I dreamed tangled rotors, snow, basement nails, fire, an empty chair. Morning, my throat raw as desert air. I showered cold, tied my hair, folded the binder, half as thick now. I kept some pages, not to nurse grudges, but to remember. Discipline means evidence. Forgiveness doesn't mean deleting the data. On the way back, we stopped by a churchyard playground. 4th morning, sky pale blue, empty swings swaying. I sat down, chains creaking, stomach lurching the way it does when a helicopter noses down before pulling level. Cade took the swing beside me, nudged the dirt with his boot, then handed me a folded list. "Here, community centers across New Mexico that took in foster kids. A vet group running life skill workshops. A summer camp teaching rotor models." He looked me dead on. "You said action equals love, then act. Some tenderness grows in silence. No hugs, no pats, just a checklist, the language I spoke best." "Thanks," I whispered. I snapped a photo, emailed it to myself, subject line, post mission. Give. Crossing the state line, I turned off onto a dirt road leading to a wind farm. Towers spun slow, rotors calm as old giants. Steel hummed deep, steady, a hymn of metal. I stood under one, staring up. Maybe I always needed something that turned to trust the world hadn't frozen. I opened the noise folder on my phone, hit delete all. Confirmation box. I pressed yes, clean as wiping grease off a panel. The still zone shifted, lighter. Back at base, Chief waited by the pad. He didn't ask, "You okay? Or do you regret it?" He just held out his palm. I dropped the shiny bolt into it. He turned it between fingers, smirked. "Right torque." Then gave it back. "Training flight tomorrow if you want." I nodded, not to escape, but because the sky was the one place no one CC'd a family email. That night, squadron cookout. Dell recounted lip reading at the diner, words like shame and duty over and over. His voice flat, like reading wind speed. No one commented. Jackson slid me a piece of burnt brisket. "Eat, Quinn." I chewed, sweet and smoky, like my first free lunch after a school race. I thought of the foster kid standing in front of a locked fridge and felt a gentleness toward her. Don't worry, kid. One day you'll eat at tables no one pushes you from. Later, I sat alone under the belly of an HH-60 back against its landing gear. The bird slept metal cooling with soft ticks. I opened my phone, typed an email to Counselor June, unsure if the address still worked. June, I kept the safety plan you wrote years ago. Tonight, I used it to escape another basement, the basement of guilt. I burned half the file, kept half. I stopped wishing for a different past. I chose action. If you're still in room 104, you'll know the sound I heard tonight. Click. Attached photo, shiny bolt on page reading END state, calm. Night wind washed the tarmac clean, sterile as gauze. The frame creaked with tiny clicks as metal cooled, the softest music I'd ever heard. I closed my eyes, imagined rotors spooling up tomorrow. Not to flee, to lift someone else out of the dark, like I once lifted myself with nothing but a rusty nail. Days later, the funeral happened states away. I didn't attend. Didn't need to know death had come. Instead, I wrote a letter, mailed slow, paper and ink that demanded no reply. I came. I listened. I presented truth. I leave with no hatred, only boundaries. I hold no debts without receipts. May the rest of your lives be free of blood as rope. Mara, dropping it in the box, the metal door slammed shut with a clunk, not like the basement lock. This time it was mine. Warmth spread in my chest, the still zone alive. Back in the squadron meeting, I raised my hand. Monthly rotor workshops for foster kids near base. Teach them to build paper rotors. Explain why small things keep big structures standing. Chief raised an eyebrow. Budget? I'll fundraise. Action equals love, sir. His smile tugged. Approved. That night in barracks, I opened my notebook. New page, post-mission plan. Contact centers ABC, raise funds for rotor kits, markers, tape. Every session, a micro-protocol on exits, draw, write, count, call. No sob stories. Just let the kids write their own checklists. At the bottom, I sketched a 4-blade rotor. In the center, a dot, the kid I was counting screws to breathe. Underneath, I block printed, calm under fire, lights out. Darkness dropped like a thick blanket, but my heart beat steady now. Tight, firm, right torque. Tomorrow, I'd bring the first box of kits to the playground by the wind farm. I pictured the kids running with paper rotors, shouting laughter, the sound I once had forbidden. I didn't need the sky to believe I was flying. All I needed was a rotor turning. And in the still zone, I finally understood. Silence wasn't a sentence. It was the runway for another sound, waiting to rise. The community playground sat tucked behind a small church in the southwest. A few months ago, it was nothing but weeds, rusted swings creaking like broken hinges. Now a fresh sign hung at the gate. Rotor Fund Foster Kids Project. Below the letters, Chief had approved my request to add our squadron's logo, a stylized HH-60, rotor blades drawn like a 4-petaled flower. Opening day dawned soft blue, the kind of sky that felt like a promise. I arrived early, unloading boxes filled with markers, wooden sticks, and paper rotor kits I'd packed in the barracks over weeks of late nights. In my backpack, I stashed granola bars and juice boxes for the kids whose eyes would look exactly like mine once had, hungry but too proud to say it. The vans pulled up rattling, doors sliding open. Kids spilled out, scuffed sneakers, shirts 2 sizes too big, hair brushed in a hurry. They hesitated at the gate, scanning the crowd with the caution of strays who'd been burned before. I waved. Come on in. No chores, no homework today. Just one small build, a paper rotor. And remember, when the wind hits, it'll spin. And when it spins, you'll know you made it turn. They crowded around, the air thick with paper dust, glue, and the faint scent of desert sand. A curly-haired boy sat cross-legged, stuck a stick through his paper, puffed hard, and the blades spun fast. He burst out laughing, face tipped to the sun. That laugh cut a weight off my chest like a cable finally snapping free. A shy girl sat apart, knees pulled to her chest. I knelt eye level. "Wanna try? You don't have to be good, just touch it." Her nod was barely there, but I handed her a kit, guided her through each fold. When her rotor spun in the breeze, her eyes lit like someone had flipped a breaker. By noon, the squadron rolled in. BBQ smoke curled high, thick and sweet. Chief carried a tray piled with ribs, sweat darkening his t-shirt. Jackson cradled his newborn while his wife laughed beside him. Dell perched under a tree, guitar humming a country line. Cade, classic Cade, popped open a cooler full of root beer. "Sergeant Quinn," Chief called across the yard, "nobody survives alone. We cook together, we eat together." I laughed, took the tongs from him, flipping meat as kids swirled around us, their paper rotors catching sunlight like tiny propellers. The cookout turned into a block party. Corn grilled buttery and charred, ribs sizzled, kids shrieked chasing each other with sticky fingers. I sat on a bench, Cade tossing me a hot dog. "Eat, Quinn, you're too thin." His grin was half serious. I bit in, crunchy bread and smoky sausage filling my mouth. For once I wasn't hiding food in my pocket. I was eating like I belonged. One boy tripped, rotor snapping in two. His lip trembled. I knelt, handed him a new kit. "See this? HH60 rotors break too if the wind's strong enough. We swap them, torque them right, and it flies again. Breaking doesn't mean the end, it means rebuild." His tears stalled, smile returning. I thought if someone had told me that when I was a kid, maybe I wouldn't have trembled holding a rusty nail. Later, we walked the kids to the flight line. The HH60 crouched there, black skin gleaming under the gold sun. They gasped, eyes wide as if staring at a dinosaur alive. I lifted a little girl into the pilot's seat. "You know what this does? Save people," she shouted. "That's right, and maybe one day you'll sit here for real." Her eyes shone bright enough to light a hanger. In her face, I saw 13-year-old me staring at a calendar picture of a helicopter, daring to believe in a sky. When the sun dipped, I helped Chief clear trays, clinking cans into bags. He studied me. "Quinn, you just wrote a new chapter, and none of your blood kin can erase it." I kept my voice even. "Just following protocol." He chuckled. "No, this time you wrote the protocol for the next generation." Night fell. The kids went home clutching paper rotors like treasure. Their laughter still echoed in the empty lot. The squadron lingered by the dying coals, Dell strumming a low, warm tune. I lay back in the grass, eyes on the silent HH60 under the moon. From my pocket, I pulled the shiny bolt I'd carried for years. Once, it was a relic of darkness. Now, just memory. I turned it in the moonlight, whispering, "Love is action, and my action is to stay." Dawn bled across the horizon, painting the tarmac orange. Chief signaled startup. The HH60 blades spooled slow, then faster, beating steady air into life. I stood shoulder to shoulder with my squadron, my heart syncing with the rhythm. No longer the sound of escape. Now it was a collective heartbeat. I closed my eyes, breathing in jet fuel and dust. For the first time, I didn't need a checklist to believe. I was safe. I had survived, and more than that, I had learned to fly.